We'll go ahead and call to order and do a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Reska, excuse me.
Ms. Nardi.
Ms. Nardi, would you take the roll? I just called you by Laura's. It's going to be a long night.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Yes.
Here. This evening we have recognitions. Dr. Freitas.
Good evening, honorable board members. The Illinois Music Educators Conference All-State Music Festival, beginning tomorrow, January 26th to the 29th, is a gathering of our state's brightest and most talented student musicians. Performing musicians will rehearse with renowned conductors from all over the country. The future music educators learn about the field of music education, including attending clinics by some of our state's top teachers. Our composers attend workshops and share their compositions with composition professors and other attendees from around the state. I would like to congratulate RB's all-state musicians now.
All right, Dr.
Mr.
Ferris,
Mann?
let's get a minute for the board to come up as well.
Mr. Mann?
President and Vice President want to go up there with Mr. Manning?
The first student we would like to recognize this evening received the honors our state in orchestra, Noah Briones. In the next category, we have 3 students that earned all-state honors for choir: Lily Berkowitz, Brooke Craig, and Aiden Leffel. These students went through grueling auditions in districts and ended up being recognized as all-staters in the categories of orchestra and choir. We're so proud of you, Bulldogs. Congratulations. The next 2 students we'd like to recognize are future music educators, Gwendolyn Edelman and Veronica Hunt. These students submitted video interviews, and out of thousands of students, only 50 were chosen as future music educators. Congratulations, Gwendolyn and Veronica.
Dr. Freitas, did you miss the Claire? All-state?
Yes, and all-state choir as well, Claire Schroeder. Claire? And last but not least, earning first place composition and electronic dance music, Maxwell Didio. Maxwell ended up receiving the honor of first place in electronic dance music in the entire state. So Maxwell is the state champion. And also, I would like to invite at this time Mr. Loeb and Ms. Matana, if you guys could come on up so we can do a group picture.
Let's hear it for Mr. Loeb and Ms. Matana.
Let's do one more. Students up front. We have the educators right here. All right. Let's do students up front. Right here. Okay. You guys, certificates up, certificates up.
Too short for the back row. Cheese.
Nice job, everybody. There is no student association report that was canceled because of all the school activities going on.
Okay, thank you. Let's give them a second. Do we have anyone here for visitor statements this evening? Oh, the room's going to clear out. Give everyone a second.
Well, it's exciting to see people come for the awards, though.
Yes. Visitor statements. I'm not seeing anyone. We'll move on to discussion information items or additional discussion items, 2 different items. Does anyone have anything from the board?
For tonight? No, but I do have something we'll ask at the end of the night for future, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we will address goals still this evening, too.
Oh, it wasn't about that, yeah.
Okay. Reports, President's Report. I have no official report this evening. We'll talk about the goal process a little bit later on in the agenda. We want to get to some of our more substantive reports now. Superintendent's Report.
Second semester started January 3rd. It was a quick turnaround from the New Year's Day holiday, coming back on that Monday. Next year's calendar, if it was approved last board meeting, you'll see that we do not come back until like January 6th or January 8th. So there will not be as quick of a turnaround, but just the way the schedule lined up with finals and stuff this year. So we are officially in the second semester. COVID-19, and the board's not aware we are in a second full year of a pandemic. That was a little joke. I say that tongue in cheek. The district did experience a surge at the end of December and in January. The building administration, nurses' office staff monitor our case counts daily. They continue to work closely with Cook County Health Department on case reporting and monitoring adaptive pauses with some of the athletic teams. The faculty and staff did an outstanding job. Commend the teachers and all the support staff. Assisting to make sure classes got coverage in those first 2 weeks when subs were needed, and getting the building open for in-person learning. We are starting to see a decline, and knock on wood, in our case reports. I would probably want to wait to see another week if we're following the national and state trend of case counts starting to go down. Testing. The district did sign on with SHIELD to have additional testing available in the nurse's office. We are a CLIA certified testing location, so we can self-test. Some of our other feeder schools that are using SHIELD actually work with SHIELD personnel. We can self-collect. So this will take a few weeks to get up and running, but these additional tests will provide us some more flexibility to test asymptomatic staff and students. Rapid tests are becoming a premium in the state and in the country. So they're limiting on a weekly basis how many tests we can pick up from the distribution point. And so we wanted to have an additional level of testing for people that are asymptomatic, or we're just concerned about being a close contact, so that we can use the SHIELD program as well. Dr. Smetana is handling that, and we're hopeful the first week of February, by the end of the second week of February for sure, that we're up and running. We're hopeful. We did do some additional mitigations. The board's aware of these, but we did provide all of our teachers with KN95 masks. We had a second booster. We had 2 booster clinics. Our first one filled up completely a few days before on the 14th, so we had a second booster clinic this past Friday. So we held 2 booster clinics in the cafeteria, not only for the high school students and their families, but also we saw several of our feeder students come in to get their booster shots. The CDC and IDPH did adjust the quarantine guidance for K-12 schools to align with the CDC guidance. So that should hopefully help with some of our cases for staff members getting coverage back in the building for in-person learning, and also with some of the concerns from our parents if their student has to be out. Now it's down to 5 days, so that is helpful. In regards to my advisory councils, no updates on curriculum facilities advisory council. We had to replace the main pool pump and the filtration system last week, but Aramark was aware of this and already had the pump purchased and on hand. So we were actually to get it in about 36-hour turnaround, so that was good. Finance Advisory Council, no new updates. We'll provide our financial projections to the board at the February COW. So the Finance Advisory Council will see those beforehand. No new personnel updates. Policy, we made modifications to board policy 7:315. That was something we discussed doing at our last board meeting, and you'll see that in your packet tonight. And no updates on the purchase, sale, or lease of land. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Dr. Skinkis. Dr. Smetana, Assistant Superintendent, please.
Good evening. My monthly reports tonight will provide the Board of Education with information through the month of December, which represents 50% of our fiscal year. On board book page 6 is our monthly summary report. You can see the total operating revenue for the month was $470,381, 42% coming from evidence-based funding, which is state funding, 24% coming from local fees, food service reimbursement, as well as commission, age group gymnastics, and then a good portion of it was also this month due to the District 96 payment for our shared music teacher, and 21% came from federal and state reimbursements. The total operating expenditures for the month were just over $2 million, with 75% towards salary and benefits, 7% towards purchase services, again, primarily food service for satellite schools, 6% towards special education tuition, and then there's a typo on the summary memo. It should say 6% towards transportation, which includes special ed transportation as well as general transportation for athletics. On the next page begins the monthly financial statements. The summary of the fund balances shows that the district's operating funds have a positive balance so far for the fiscal year of $127,707. And so I mention this because the district will really need to rely on the fund balances over the next few months, especially in January and February, to cover expenses, and possibly longer depending on what happens with property tax collection. But we will not have a significant amount of revenue until we receive the spring property tax collection. The summary of revenue shows that the district has received 49.2% of our budgeted revenue for the year. This amount is very similar to this time last fiscal year. And then to date, the district has received 97.4% of the budgeted prior year property tax. And so compared to what we have budgeted, we're chasing around $262,000 from prior year property tax collection at this point. The summary of expenditure shows that the district has spent 50% of the budgeted expenditures for the year, which is great. We're tracking right on track. We have 50% of the fiscal year completed. And then, as always, for your information, I included the statement of revenue and expenditures report along with the student activity report. There are 2 informational items that came in since I submitted the information for the board packet. The first is we have 2 control panels for our HVAC units and our heating units that are on their last leg. And so we are in the process of getting quotes and ordering them tomorrow morning. But for the 2 of them combined, it could be somewhere between $10,000 to $16,000. So you'll likely see that bill at the next board meeting. So I just wanted to call your attention to that. And then second, we have a possible opportunity to apply for the school maintenance grant. It's a long shot, but I will need the board's approval to apply. We have gotten it in the past, but they're opening up like this special round. And so I'll be bringing it to the board at the next board meeting because it does require board approval, but it's a matching program for us to receive up to $50,000, depending on obviously how much we plan on spending. So I'll be bringing the entire grant application to the board for approval at the next February meeting.
As the board may remember, some of the board members that were on, we used this like when we did some of our initial roof repairs. One section of roof was $100,000, so we were able to show that information and get 50 of that. It's a matching grant, like Kristen said, so it's an opportunity for some money. We're trying to put the charging station in out by the football field. We have some bathroom partitions that need to be purchased. We have some possibly some other items with some of our sustainability initiatives. So I told Kristen to put as much stuff down on there as we can to see what can get approved. The board step is a formality.
So are we looking for direct approval at the next board meeting then?
Yes.
We
Okay.
are.
So just so everyone can think on that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that concludes my report. I don't know if there are any
Kristen,
questions.
was there a question
There was a
submitted for you?
question.
It was answered. It was transportation.
Okay.
How much of our, approximately how much, if you know, of our funding comes from EBF? Sorry to put you on the
So
spot.
1.8.
No, I think it's a little over 2 now. It's probably a little over 2 million.
Okay, I just wanted to, I know I sent everyone a link, so about.
Less than 10%.
Yes.
Lobbying, for EBF to the governor's office, and for anyone out there that's listening, if you want to as well, to make sure that the governor puts the amount that they've promised to be earmarked in the new budget for the state in the first week in February. If you go to Advance Illinois, you can find the link to send the governor a letter to earmark, I think it's $350 million or something like that for EBF. So it's my little
Any
commercial
questions for Dr.
for tonight.
Smetana or questions on the commercial? We good? Moving on to Dr. Freitas, Principal's Report.
President Diana, Dr. Skink, if it's okay with you, I'd like to get my team up
Absolutely.
here first so they can
Your
come
call.
on. I would like to introduce Ms. Bess Augustine and Ms. Pushpa Winbush, if they could present on the multi-tier systems of supports.
Good evening.
Beth, before we get started, this past weekend was incoming freshman registration. Everything went okay?
It was. It went very, very well. Glad to have it in person. I feel like the families were really happy to be in the building. We now have our registration process primarily online, so families are submitting most of their documents via Skyward when they do the registration process in the fall. So really all they were doing is picking classes, so it was really nice. The instructional coaches were available for placement change requests. They met with a counselor or an instructional coach to select their classes, and it was pretty seamless, I have to say.
It was great.
Good.
My husband dropped us off, and I'm like, I'll call you when we're done. I had to call him really quickly. I'm like, okay, you need to turn back around. We're done.
He wasn't even home yet?
He wasn't even home yet. It was,
Oh my God, that's
it
awesome.
was perfect.
We're working on it because we had the makeup today. I feel like we had a good turnout, but today we had probably 20 families in. So that's April's task tomorrow, is to go through all of the names that we have from the feeder schools and cross-reference that with the green sheets that they turned in with their course registration.
Dr. Smetana, this will be I'm trying to think back to the November presentation. Is this our biggest freshman class, for one of our bigger freshman classes? Then it starts to go down?
It's definitely one of our bigger. I don't know if it's.
Okay. Not our big, I'm not looking to say like record, right?
Yes.
But it was a bigger group, correct?
It's a big group.
Correct.
Okay.
But we'll have that number by February when the Finance
Yeah.
Council meets, right?
Yes.
So this evening I am not going to do this. Push was going to do this. She's going to present on our MTSS structure at RB, and I'm really excited to have her have the opportunity to speak with all of you.
So yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the
Pushpa,
time.
before you start
Yes.
this, I'll give you a quick introduction. So Pushpa
Yeah.
is a school psychologist from LADSI. Just so the board remembers, we purchased our school psychologist through LADSI, which is our special education cooperative. And Pushpa, you have been with us now for 5 years?
7.
7, okay,
Yeah.
close. And in this past year, with our ESSER money that we got from COVID, we hired a third school psychologist from LADSI. And Pushpa's primary responsibility is working on multi-tiered system of supports and analyzing all of our student data, both academically, behavior, and social emotional. And that's what she's going to speak to you tonight. But she's done a great job. She's very passionate about this, and we've been talking about this for a while. So
Thank you. Yes, this is my dream job. So again, thank you for having me. And it's not often you hear of a school psychologist at a district speaking at a board meeting, so I appreciate the time, for sure. As Dr. Skink has said, I think getting the third school psychologist has allowed me the time to focus on the proactive end of service delivery, and the MTSS framework, which is the multi-tiered system of supports. And essentially, it's a framework that relies on data on all different levels and looks at academic, social, emotional. And what it does is, the whole purpose is to identify at-risk students before they fall through the cracks, is to by using screeners at certain points in time, identifying the at-risk students, and then putting supports in place that are evidence-based. And that is the framework at RB is what I'll get into in a little bit. But what that looks like, that framework as a whole at RB includes the screeners, which just last year we had STAR assessments that freshmen took. Then this year we added sophomores to that. So we have freshmen and sophomores this year who took the STAR reading and math assessments. On the social emotional end of it, we have Satchel Pulse, which we're piloting this year. So we have done that in fall, and we've given the winter screener as well. So that's the social emotional end of it. So when we administer those screeners, and then we have data meetings that we kind of sit with the teams that are involved with this. So with the reading team, I sit with teachers who teach reading. I sit with the English teachers. I sit with the math teachers. We look at that data and kind of identify students who need more support. Are they getting the support they need? Those are the kind of questions we look at based on this data. And then we kind of do a similar thing with Satchel Pulse data, which we'll kind of get into a little bit more in detail as to what that looks like. And then we also, once supports have been identified, so students who are in the at-risk classes or the supported classes, like the reading and the extended math, we keep ongoing data to see whether that's making a difference, whether that, that intervention is actually effective or not, or do we need to change something. So that's kind of overall what that framework is supposed to do, if it's done right and if we get the right data. So on the next slide, when we talk about a multi-tiered system of support framework, we always talk in terms of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. That's pretty common to hear. So when I talk about Tier 1, it's all students. So it encompasses the entire school. So you're talking about Common Core curriculum that all students have access to. And the EF routines, which again was new this year. So all teachers got trained on those EF routines, right? And if you step into majority of the classrooms and I know that I've stepped into, have the agenda put up there. They have what the homework assignments is. So it's all very clear in terms of the routines the students are expected to follow. And that's something that is new this year, and I'm really happy to see. So that's kind of Tier 1. Everybody gets access to it. Tier 2 is those that do not respond to Tier 1 supports Common Core curriculum. They still continue to struggle, say in math or reading. We kind of take the data from STAR, from classroom assessments, and we identify those kids and provide them smaller group instruction. So the way to look at that is the students who are in extended algebra. It's kind of a subset of the whole population of students in freshmen. So when you look at SEL, we do small groups targeting anxiety or whatever the targeted area of concern may be. So we kind of tailor it to what the students need. For EF support, we do check-in, check-outs with students to kind of help them with those skills. So that's a smaller group. And then we have Tier 3, which is really intensive support. So students who don't respond to the first two, we look at Tier 3 supports. So it's individualized pull-out supports, which some students are getting now in math and reading, and one-on-one meetings with social work psychologists. That's at the social emotional end of it. So as you can see, it's increase in intensity, and and when students don't respond to Tier 1, Tier 2, they just get added on to. We look at more intense supports as we go through it. Any questions on that?
EF is executive functioning.
Executive functioning, yes. Yeah, I have to remind myself to stop with the abbreviations, but it's hard to do. So this slide right here, I'm going to click the next slide, kind of gives an overall framework on, once it comes up, on what the tiered supports are at RB currently, right? So when you look at the academic end of it, you look at Tier 1, you have, everybody has access to Homework Hangout, you have the EF routines, you have Common Core standards. So, as you go through this flow chart here, you kind of can see that there are various levels of support. Can it be better and strengthened? Sure, absolutely. And that's what my role is to kind of see which of these work. Do any of these need to be changed? Do any of these need to be refined in any way? Or are there areas that we're missing, right? So I think that's kind of the data that I'm looking at and keeping. So for example, like Homework Hangout, I look at attendance. how many students actually attend, right? How frequently is it being used? EF routines, same thing. Like I send out surveys to teachers asking, do you have students who need extra support, who are not responding to the whole class routine? So I kind of keep data, students in reading, I keep data on how they're doing in class. So for each of these supports, I try to maintain data on how things are going, how effective are these supports.
Can I ask
Yes?
in the homework hangout, are
Yes.
you using students to do some tutoring? Like from the
Yeah, we
national?
have NHS tutors
Okay.
who are available.
Okay.
I will say, are they utilized? Not as much as they could be. But they are certainly available. They're always very conscientious about attending and being there for support if needed.
Yeah, it's an NHS, everybody tutors twice a quarter, if you're a member.
And do you get service hours for doing that?
I believe so.
Yeah, you have to file the request yourself, but yes.
I work with Ms. Thomasek, who's in charge of that,
Okay.
and she makes sure that they get what they need in terms of credit for that. And
Yeah, because the service hours right there, right, your
Yeah.
transcript and
Yeah.
straight ahead. Great.
no, it's
Fantastic.
and the students are amazing. I mean, the students that they help are. We've definitely actually matched up individual tutors, especially in the area of math, which is always a struggle. So if I get a teacher saying the student needs extra help, I've actually reached out to Ms. Thomasek and said, is there a tutor you have that I can match up with a particular student? And that's worked as well for multiple meetings. So, any questions on this framework at all? Or,
So I don't want to jump ahead to your conclusion, but you said that you look at the data
Yes.
and make recommendations
Yes.
to enhance. Do you have specific recommendations at this point, or you're in the data collection phase
yeah,
for the
it's
most
still the
part now?
middle of the year, so yeah,
Okay.
it's ongoing. So right now, for example, we just collected Satchel data, and the screening window just closed 24th. So now I'm actually meeting in the next couple of days with the social workers and psychs to actually look at that data and see, are there any groups that we need to add compared to what we did first semester based on what we see. So yes, it's ongoing, to answer your question.
Okay, thank
But
you.
I think you're always assessing our current screeners, and we've already had a
Correct.
conversation about Satchel. Like, we're learning that there are some things that it's not providing. For example, we learned that a student is not able to print their own
Their
report. So we've had students, after they take it, well, okay, what does it say about me? The only way that they could do that is if they actually went to like a counselor or a social worker so that they could interpret the data for them. So Pushpa and I had a conversation about that the other day, and I said, maybe reach out to some other school psychs, see what other schools are using, and maybe we could kind of put together a little flow chart of Satchel and a couple of other programs and the pros and the cons and the costs and what are the benefits that we could get out of that program. Because we really found that Satchel is looking more at it's social emotional, but it doesn't really get at those kids that might be, I say, suffering in silence with anxiety or depression. It doesn't really get to those really kind of deep issues.
Very general.
Yeah.
Very broad and general. So, so consequently, to your point, like I'm also reaching out to other providers now and kind of exploring what other options there may be that'll get at more targeted areas, social emotionally.
I guess, the reason I ask is I think, this board clearly has invested in this
Yeah.
area, and we're concerned, and we know the
Absolutely.
pandemic is not over, right? And this is the residual impact of what we've all been going through. So
Yeah.
I think, as we look towards next year's budget, what other, resources might be identified, the sooner we understand that as a board, I think it's better.
Absolutely.
So what about, in Satchel is the data warehouse for the social emotional, yes?
Yes.
What about the academic? Like, where do you keep that data? Or
That's
what?
STAR has it,
Oh,
STAR
so
Renaissance.
it's all inside STAR?
It's
So
in
you
STAR.
don't need like an additional EduClimber or something like that for all the data?
So that's a good question. No, I don't need anything initial. I think we have a lot of academic data points, to be honest with you. We have STAR, then we have a lot of classroom assessments that I
Right.
also have on my own spreadsheet, so other than STAR, right? I put those on there as well for all those at-risk classes. And then we have the high-stakes testing, so there's a lot of
Yeah, I
academic
think
data points.
I'm asking, like, to Deanna's point about budgeting and where do you see this going? Do you need a digital data warehouse platform in order to keep you organized and
Appreciate the
take away
question.
some of that management piece
Yeah.
so that you could further focus on the needs of the children.
So there is a program in Skyward in our student information system that is, they call it, it's RTI, it's the same thing as MTSS.
Right.
So we actually just received a quote, I haven't even spoken to Kristen about that, but what that would cost to add that onto our services, and then that would be a place where we could track students through the MTSS process, where you can very quickly look at a student's sort of profile and what we've done if we're moving them
And it's
through.
in the same place of where they're going for other
Where the,
information.
right, the
For
teachers are
attendance,
already, the
Right,
teachers
but
are already
everything would be
going there.
tracked in one space.
That's smart.
And if, what would be wonderful is if we could, whether we stay with Satchel or not, but if there is a program that talks to Skyward. So at the end of every day, it's like kind of like Naviance. Naviance and Skyward talk to each other. So
Sure,
at the end
like
of every
set
day.
up the sync and then
Right.
it'll just automatically
Exactly.
dump from one to the other.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's on the to-do list.
On the wish list, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
We
awesome.
were able to get the Satchel data out to more students the
Yes.
second time through, right?
Definitely more,
And
a lot more students.
The tech companies some of the companies like this that I've worked with, like if you send them a product enhancement, they're pretty, not to say that like, oh, RB wants this, we're gonna do it. But like the more product enhancement hits they get on a certain thing, then they'll do it. So if you want that product enhancement, you should contact the maker, and maybe you'll see it in the future. So it would be worth contacting Satchel, sending them an email or looking at their help,
Already on it.
base.
Yeah, on
She's
it.
become best friends. Part of the
Yeah.
problem is that Satchel is in companies based out of England, so there's always
Gotcha,
that like
that time difference, 6
time,
hours.
You
right.
got it.
Right.
You got it. But to your point, they were pretty responsive. Like, we couldn't download the data in a friendly format. So I suggested, can you download in Excel? And, it took a couple weeks, but they were able to add that.
Awesome.
So, yes,
Good.
that is a good
Okay.
point to reach out to them. So
Sorry.
that's the general framework or the supports that we have right now. And then, yes, on the academic end, there's always, like I mentioned, math. Math is always an area that a lot of students struggle in. So, is it possible to have something during the school day? So those are all questions that have come up, that we are obviously with by the end of the year, hopefully with a lot more data, we can kind of see where to go with it. But
We can put together a wish list. That's not a problem.
That's always,
It's not
easy to do.
overextend ourselves.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was getting excited there. Brain is already going.
We wanted to open the communication.
It's good to throw a list. We'll put together a list.
Okay.
So then the last slide kind of takes Satchel, it kind of explains or kind of takes a little bit of a deeper look into the kinds of data that I take into consideration when I look at it. So like any good data person knows, like you don't want to take just one data point, right? So in addition to that Satchel, what Satchel gives you is tiers. So once students take that survey, they actually get put into a tier based on how they respond. So then on my end, what I do is I download the data now that it's available in Excel. I download it and then I add to it the attendance piece, so for all those students who are in tier 2 and tier 3, those are the two I look at, the at-risk students, I kind of add that attendance column, and then so the 5-10 list is that I got from the deans, students who are considered at risk, missing 5 to 10 days, this was in fall, and then I add, like, have they had any behavior referrals, yes or no. So then if you kind of look through that and scroll through that, you'll see, obviously there's no student names, but you'll see red across the board. So those are the students most at risk. Obviously they're kind of multiple indicators that they're highlighted across. So those are our first kids that we pull to, okay, what is this kid getting, right? So those are the kids we pull as tier 3 first and foremost and make sure they're all, addressed in some way, shape, or form. And then we kind of form small groups based on the area that is identified in Satchel. So it's kind of a very systematic way of looking at it. And I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of what that might look like. I also add course failures, how many students failed one or more core classes to that. So that is another layer to it. So that's just an example of what that looks like.
And then where we do our problem solving, we call them small teams. I don't know, we've never come up with a more creative name. But our small team meetings, 2 counselors are paired with a social worker and a psych, and we have meetings on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and the psychs bring the data and we add students to the agenda, and then we're problem solving, or we're doing individual problem solving. So students who are maybe not appropriate for a group, or what we're seeing is more intense. We're problem solving and making determinations. Are we looking at a schedule change? Have we had parent meetings? What's the background on this student? So if it's a student from a school from our feeder school, sometimes we have data from them. If this is a student that's transferred from a school that's not within our district, we'll reach out to them. Would you have information on the student? Sometimes we'll find a student had an IEP years ago and never made its way to our district. So we do a lot of sort of fact-finding during those meetings, and then hopefully put some interventions in place. And if they're not responding, try something else. You just keep trying until you can actually see some progress.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What happens if the student didn't take the Satchel? How do they make it to the list?
If they didn't take it or missed it, very often the teacher will have them retake it. Also, it's a question of if the student falls on the radar somehow or the other. So students who are genuinely in crisis and have a lot going on, the first point of contact, quite honestly, tends to be social work or the counselor. So a lot of these students that you'll see red across are already on the radar. So they're not completely new to us. So I am pretty confident that we are getting all those students who really are in crisis. Those who don't take it, I know Dr. Freitas has made multiple announcements, like please reminding them to keep taking it. That's really the only way, unfortunately. Like I have to send them the email and they have to actually click to actually complete it. That's the way Satchel works. So unfortunately, there's no way to guarantee, that all students will take it, because it goes to their inbox and then they have to click on it to take it.
So then I would say that that's a flaw in and of itself, because
it's definitely
if
a
you're
drawback.
silently suffering and you send me a Satchel assessment, I'm not going to take it. I'm going to be like, this is not for me, right? So just to encourage you to, is there a list
Good
you
point.
can cross-reference, right? So versus saying I'm confident that we're catching them, say we know we're catching them because we have cross-referenced our roster or something, right?
I do think we improved second semester.
Oh, significantly.
Compared to where we were first semester.
And the good news is that the number of freshmen and sophomores that took it were in the 80%. And that's really who we were. Not that we're not concerned about the juniors and seniors, but at least we had some relationships with them. We know those students. Our current sophomores, last year, many of them as freshmen never walked in the building. And then our current freshmen, we had very little data. We didn't have a placement test on them. Their 8th grade teachers didn't know them. It was hard for them to share information. So I think when we were talking about the administration of this, we really were concerned, because at one point we talked about not even administering it to juniors and seniors, and we were really thinking, let's just do the freshmen and sophomores, and then it was like, okay, why not? Let's just do everyone. So I think totally hear what you're saying, but I think the good news is that at least we're getting some data on our freshmen and sophomores.
Yeah, and I did wanted to add, another list we look at is our early warning system students that have missed 5 or 10 days, that have failed the class, or that have received certain behavioral referrals. So we are cross-referencing our practicing to the best of our ability to making sure we get all of our Bulldogs the supports they need.
And the board will see that information from first semester from Mr. Mann, who will be presenting next. But one of the reasons I thought it was really important after our first semester to get Pushpa and Beth in here is we've dedicated some funding to this through our ESSER funds, and you can see the value this is bringing. And this is one of those projects that, as a board, we would want to make sure we can sustain even when the ESSER money is used up. right? This is important. So I do think, this is a good foundation that we've put in place this year. We always had response to intervention in small teams, but having a dedicated person to monitor the data and the interventions has really been beneficial. So I just want to congratulate you, Pushpa, a good job.
Thank you, I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
this is a big undertaking, and I appreciate your honesty about, right, the bumps in the road and the real story that you tell about what's going on here at RB. I think we have a lot to celebrate, right? We have a lot of great things going on. Of course, we don't ever want to miss any child, right? We want all of our students to get everything that they need. But yeah, like, this is awesome. This is awesome. Thank you for your time and energy. I know it's a lot. I know
Appreciate
it's a
it.
lot.
No, I love to do it, so
Yeah.
something to do.
I have two quick, go
Yeah.
ahead. No, yeah.
So at a very high level, several
Yes.
meetings back, we talked about freshmen on track. And the principal's going to come and tell us that there's a small number of freshmen on track that aren't on track. This is right where they're being helped, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's one of the questions that I think Mr. Durkin was submitted, right? You'll touch on that?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly why this is
Yes.
supposed to do.
So I wanted to get them credit for that, too. Freshmen on track, they're looking out for them.
So that's going to be one of the crosswalks to this list,
Yeah.
to Ms. Gaska's point.
I have a question
Okay,
before you.
I said two, these are probably way too in the weeds, I just want to ask them really quickly, though. Attendance, behavior, and course failures, are those all currently on Skyward?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so you're pulling that out of Sky, you're importing it into this spreadsheet, and then is this shared with, at the teacher level as well? Or is the small group use the classroom teachers to kind of assist with the process? How does that?
We'll
question.
reach out to them because we couldn't pull them to attend our meetings, so we'll ask for their feedback. And if we are problem solving on a student, we send out classroom profiles, which asks everything from attendance to class participation to how they interact with their peers to their study habits. I mean, it asks many questions so that we can kind of dive down and see, is it consistent? Because that's what we're looking at. Is this student consistently showing this in all his or her classes, or is this just happening in math? If a student's an excellent student in every other area, but yet they're struggling in math, okay, what's going on with math? What happened? Are there gaps in learning? Then we start asking the 20 questions and how to best support that student.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No, just before we move on. And a quick question, just vision. As you collect this, is there a vision then to start to bring the parents or family in and kind of walk them through and show them how the data is coming up and where you're recognizing maybe some gaps or problems?
Yeah.
We are doing that, and we're using that for students that we might consider for special education. Sometimes parents are a little resistant, especially if you're in high school and you're going to put a label on their child, and what does that look like? We have actually a couple of situations right now where just the data really shows that we need to do more in looking, possibly doing an evaluation and a little bit deeper dive on what's going on with that student. So yes, we are showing parents that, and parents, they have access to their students' grades and their attendance, but as far as like that, social emotional, there was no way to really print that out, but that's something that we can hopefully look to do in the future.
But when you bring it together like that really, parents have an intuition, but sometimes when you have something more concrete, you kind of help.
Yeah.
Like, great, now where can we get resources?
Yes. And the one other thing I'll add is the mental health days where students can have the 5 mental health days.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, so we are tracking that in student services. The attendance office has coded the students that are taking those days with a specific code. So every Monday, I am receiving a full list of the students, so it's an ongoing list. So if a student has their first absence, it's showing their name and the date that they took it. If they've had their second day, their name and the 2 dates that they took their mental health days. The counselors are receiving their caseload every Monday. When I'm getting that full list, they're getting it broken down by counselor. Then during problem solving, we have yet another tab where the counselors are adding the student's name so that we're making sure that the counselors are then following up via email or phone call. Some of these students, we already, no surprise, they've already taken, a second day. counselors have reached out. We're making certain that the parents have resources, and then we're documenting all of that so that, we're making parents respond to us and ensuring that if a student is needing help and they really are suffering in silence, that we're providing the parents with some resources to get them their help.
Thank you.
Great job.
Any
Thank
more
you.
questions? I'm sorry, I think Mr. Van Horst had a question.
As far as the utility of the individual reports, I know that it's not something that students can pull their own report, and what utility would they have if they do get access through their counselor? Are they able to look at it with some meaningful understanding? Is it something that if they do care, they're going to be able to kind of work through some things and figure out what path they might need to take for assistance or support?
Yeah, are you specifically talking about the social emotional end of it?
Yeah, I'm talking about the Satchel.
Yeah. So if you actually do look at a student report and their responses, it actually breaks it down by area of need. So when you do look at a score, it'll show you visually, like these are the areas you're strong in versus not so strong, right? So for a student who definitely wants to work on some area, it definitely motivates them to like, okay, I can get the score higher if I work on it, or in a group, I can address it, So for some students, that is motivational, to actually look at that and grow the next time around. And the tool is also designed to progress monitor if we so wish, right? So once a student is in a group, you can give it repeatedly to see growth. So that's a possibility as well that we haven't explored fully yet. So that's another option. But from a student perspective, yeah, that visually how it shows you can make a difference if they had access to it. I know one of our social workers actually was trying to do that for a class that he works with, to show it to individual students to see if then they could address needs individually or in a group, and to see if that would help. But there was no good way to access it. So
I think that, I didn't know that was an option as a student to be able to see that information, and after taking that survey, even if there's nothing in my life that I know specifically I need to work on, I think it'd be interesting to see those results and just to know like what I may be struggling in.
So I'll just add one more thing. So I know Pushpa shared the Satchel information with our ALAP advocates, and so our students who are part of that program can use the Satchel data to help design their goals, because that's part of the program, is that they're focusing on 2 or 3 specific goals. So if they're targeting some of those areas that they are struggling with based on the Satchel data, that's really concrete, because I think sometimes you ask a student what they want to do, what they want to change, and they're really not sure until maybe you show them some areas that might
Our
be.
ALOP program is another initiative we put in this year from our ESSER funds with West 40. Alternative Learning Opportunities.
opportunities.
It's an acronym I could not remember, so thank you.
I guess if it's something that we're looking to continue beyond ESSER money, my question would be of the utility that students see directly, and I think it goes to what Ms. Ruska has said about the idea that whether it's useful for the family to better understand where there may be a need for supports, or whether students can use it in a way that helps them to better understand themselves. And
Sure.
I don't think every student should be, stamped as an X and leave here as the same as their counterparts. They should be their own selves and understand who they are. Is it capable of being used that way? And I don't expect an answer from you. But,
No, it's a good question though, because a lot of the academic screeners, to your point, you do have parent reports that you can share out, and they're designed to do that, so you can actually do that. But at least Satchel for now doesn't have that option, so it's just limited so far.
But it would be amazing if you could find something that would speak to skyward, so just like a student could see their grades or any assessment they took, they could go in and see what the results of a screener.
Is there some form of, I know this is probably not the right word, but is there reliability in this? If a student takes it daily for 3 days, is it going to vary widely? Or will we see some consistency in that short time frame where we could expect that this is something that is really giving us a sense of where a student is at a moment in time?
Yeah, so they are designed to be, technically, these both the academic and the Satchel Pulse are considered to be reliable and valid. So yes, if a student does take it repeatedly, it should be pretty reliable in terms, or consistent in terms of how the results would be. In terms of progress monitoring, obviously you don't necessarily want to do it daily, but like for the academic, we advise every other week even. If you really want to track growth, that's a really good way to do it as far as frequency goes. But we haven't used that Satchel for that yet, for progress monitoring. Yeah.
Thank you, Pushpa. Thank you, Beth.
Welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bob.
Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mannon, you ready?
Yep.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Dave, does this overlap with the MTSS or?
A little bit.
They don't need to stay, right? You're good?
Yeah, you're good.
They're good. Look at them, they're good.
They're running.
I got one foot out the door.
Question there.
Okay, we'll get right to it. This is the building culture report for first semester, so we'll go over average daily attendance, tardies, suspension, discipline data. There were some questions submitted, so I will embed those throughout the report, and then please stop me if there's any additional. Average daily attendance fell at 93.58%, which is down, from our historical numbers, as you can see there, from 2020 and back to 2017. We were on a really good plane in regards to getting our average daily attendance close to where our goal is at 95% and or more. Last year we met that goal pre-COVID. We were almost there as well. Obviously, I'm going to go into some further information in regards to why that is. Obviously, COVID played a big role in that, as well as kids staying home, which we wanted them to, and not bring anything that could be potentially contagious to other students. So we saw that a lot of call-ins, a lot of sicknesses. Angie in our attendance office was busy until 4th hour every single day answering calls and things like that. So hats off to her for her work and making sure we get accurate, we code our attendance accurately as well. Our attendance per month, I wanted to put that on there just to highlight kind of the fluctuation in regards to where we're at on a monthly basis. Started off really well. We did have some late registration, but 94.6, typically we're at 96 or so to start the year off, so we're a little bit behind to start, but 94 is okay. We dipped down a little bit in September, in October, November, Thanksgiving, we saw some extended holiday vacations, and then what we also saw is those that went across state lines or what have you, if they contracted COVID, they weren't coming back in any short order, so they extended their time out, and that would cause our attendance to go down a little bit as well. And then in December, the 93%, which is a little bit better than where we're at in November, we started to see a little bit of a surge with Omicron, really like the last 3 or 4 days before break. We got to the break there, and then I'll show you where we're at with some COVID numbers and how that correlates. But that overall 93.58% for the average daily attendance there. Tardies is an interesting number to track, I think, on a yearly basis. When I first got here, we had some significant tardies. This was back in like 2015, and so we installed the HERO program, and we saw those drastically decline, which is great. And so where we're seeing a significant portion of our tardies now is first period, and so it's due to a lot of things that are outside of our control, unfortunately. We've had a sewer project on First Avenue that took a lot of our tardies up for a while, and now what we have is the crossing, the railroad crossing in Brookfield. So all the traffic that's going into town can't utilize that avenue as a way to go through and cut through. So every single car going through is going to be on this road outside here at Ridgewood and Forest. And so it's like, we relate it to like a slow locomotive going all at once, which really impacts like zoo employees or our staff, our students or drop-offs. Everyone's converging on the same spot, and we're seeing an uptick in regards to our average daily or per period tardies. And
Sorry to interrupt. It's really bad. It's like coming from Brookfield in the morning. I live on Prairie where it dead ends. It's not far from here. If you're not out of the house by 7:30, we'll definitely be late. It's really bad. So that's an explanation.
Yeah, and we're trying to problem solve this with our local officials, and the chief over in Brookfield has been phenomenal, and he actually has some officers out now helping kind of get the process a little bit smoother for us. And so We're excited to see those numbers come down a little bit for first period. We're doing a lot in regards to like our messaging, our communication. Every single tardy that a student gets is communicated out to the parents, so they do see that. Students can see that as well through the Hero platform. We're going to do more in regards to access, and we're talking about that with Satchel as well, and the capabilities that we have through Hero. But that is an automated message that goes out, and then just connecting up with families as we go in. Also, another factor with tardies as well is just, you have a pandemic and then you don't have that, I guess, that regular traffic flow and understanding of how that works in this unique setting that we have here in our entrance. And so, having like a year and a half off, potentially with majority of our students and families, took a little bit to get reacclimated as well. So we're hoping with this full year under our belt here and then starting next year as well, that'll be a little bit easier of a transition to start the school year. Some of the new initiatives that we had put in place here is the ALOT program, which we just mentioned before. We have 2 advocates that work with a caseload. We're slowly increasing that caseload as we get some of the Satchel data, as we get some more information in regards to grades and discipline and throughout those small team meetings, because that's where those conversations are held, which Beth mentioned. And then an outcome of that is, okay, what's next steps? If this is a significant attendance issue, then we're really going to utilize that ALOT program. And what they do is just do a lot of check-in, check-outs, and then they define goals for those students, because one of the questions was, is there related discipline in regards to what we're seeing in the attendance? And just looking at a brief snapshot of what Pushbub presented, I think there's like 25 students that she had on there, and you saw about 3 had behavioral referrals in regards to like significant attendance issues. So like those 3 students, okay, let's get them down into ALAP, and then let's identify what behaviors maybe are exhibiting and inhibiting their attendance and to get to school. So that's been really beneficial, and I think it's been a great resource for students to connect with other individuals in our building outside of our office, outside of Beth's office, and really what we call them is advocates. They're not counselors. They're really that safety net, kind of boost them up. And they do a lot of wraparound work as well, which is great from the regional office, where they're really extending out. They're doing home visits. They're making these connections. They're doing nightly events with families. So they're really that wraparound support that we needed. And it's been going great so far, but we're looking to enhance that and to build out their caseload to reach more students. QR codes in the handbook, some easier access for students to understand like the top 10 things that they need to know in regards to attendance. Where do I call in? All that stuff's on our first page of our handbook, so we did that this year. In-person weekly meetings for students that owe maybe a tardy consequence. And then we're really trying to utilize the homework hangout area for students that maybe hit like 12 tardies. And previously we may put them in an alternative learning environment for a day where they would be in there and do their homework. That really doesn't make sense for a student to be in school and in-school environment all day because they're late to school, like taking them out of the environment that they're late to. So in lieu of that, we have a conversation with the student first period. Hey, what's going on? How can we help? Hey, maybe in lieu of sitting in here all day, you go down to homework hangout and we can then link you up with an NHS tutor and get you where you need to go with your academics. That's been really successful. So that's an intervention restorative type practice that we're going to continue, and just think outside the box and get creative with some of these situations. And then we continue with our automated parent phone calls for students that had 5 or more absences. Our chronic truant students utilizing our safety liaison officer, going out to the community. Our deans are active and going out and connecting up with these parents, and having weekly meetings brings parents in and really making those connections with the students as well.
Thank you, Dave. Do you want the suspensions next?
Yes, there was just 2 questions. I just want to make sure I want to answer those. We talked about the question that came up in regards to our target was 1.5% below where we're at historically. I will mention that the state came out in October with the Illinois report card, and their data indicated that 1 in 5 Illinois students were listed as chronically absent, missing at least 10% of the school day without a valid excuse. So when you look at that data from the state, you know that other schools, not just us, are being impacted due to COVID, and we're kind of falling into that. But our attendance is really above where our state levels are at, and we saw that from last year where we finished with 96%. So our students are engaged in learning. And then just in regards to contact tracing, that was another question too. Our office takes on that responsibility, and so we contact traced over 418 students. We had 61 positive cases semester one for COVID. We did over 592 antigen tests. We had an 8.8% positive rate there. And then what we're really proud of is the test to stay protocol. Because we're CLIA certified, because we can test and get a rapid response, our students can stay in the building. And so we had 104 students stay in our building due to the work in the health office by Brittany and Julia. So that's really great. That helps our attendance rate, and we'll continue to do that, assuming that the state helps us out with some tests. And then in regards to assuming attendance is reviewed by grade level, is there overlap with distribution of behavior? And we see more of the overlap with students. It's not really by grade level, but more students that are not engaged. And that's just, based on the data and based on what we have when kids are engaged in whatever, in activities, extracurriculars, we know that their behaviors subside. So linking them up with ALAP advocates, with the PRIDE program, our deans attend our small teams meetings on a weekly basis. We can really get individualized with our approach with our kids. Okay, and then suspension report for this year, for first semester. We ended with 43 offenses and 43 students. So what we're seeing was there wasn't a lot of repeat offenders, which was great. The fights were up. We saw 14 compared to like 12 and 11 in 2019. I will mention that in August and September, there was 1. In October, there was 2. So even though it says 5, those are just instances. The students are the number. So really, we had 6 altercations. We want 0. But that's where we fell with some of the fights. Drug possession in regards to like THC cartridges, we had 5 there, which is down actually from where we're at in 2019. So that's great. 0 alcohol offenses, 1 vape possession. Disruption of the learning environment, that would be some type of peer conflict, not escalating to a fight, but maybe a verbal altercation, something like that. That was 6. And then we had 1 student had some gang writing in his notebook. The weapon possession, those were kind of fluke deals where we had a student come in that was using a knife as a prop for something they were doing for a class, like RBTV or something, and then another student was utilizing it he had a job where he was using a box cutter and just happened to have it on him. And so historically, we don't see weapon possessions like that, and so I'm hoping, and obviously we saw that throughout the rest of the months in the semester, but that's where we fell for first semester there. And then inappropriate and non-compliance behaviors, I think our staff has been doing a great job with there's a lot of stress and anxiety, like Beth said, and so really being cognizant and helping kids through a really tough semester. So seeing the numbers where we did in regards to 12 there, I think that's great. So that's where the 43 ended up. And there was a couple questions that I'll answer here too. Suspension percentage by grade, I just kind of broke that out because a couple of the meetings that we've had previously, you wanted to see a little bit more data in regards to by grade level, but then also by race. And so you can see where we're at with those percentages. Thank you for the question in regards to breaking that down even further. So let me just talk about that. So the percentage that you see on the suspensions in regards to race, that's out of the population that we had total. So that's out of the 43. So out of the 43 suspensions, 50% were Hispanic, 25% were white, 18.2% black, and then 6.8% like 2 or other races. And then if you break that down in regards to our total population, which is 1,656, it would be like 9 black students, or 8%. Or 22 Hispanic students, 3%, 2 or more, like 0.5%, and then like white 11 or 1.3%. So it's really a lower percentage, although we do have a higher percentage of and 8% in regards to black and 3% for Hispanic. We obviously want to look at that. But those numbers are going to be a little bit higher due to the lower amount of students. The population's lower, obviously. So
these percentage really were, it was the percentage of the pool of students that had received a suspension.
Right.
And probably a little note under there would be helpful. Out of the pool of students who received a suspension, this was the makeup.
Yeah, and my question, I think that's the number you're giving. So I'll use the Hispanic population as an example. Did you say 3%?
Correct.
For that one. So of the, how many?
651 students.
Okay. Hispanic students and whatever number it was that breaks down to 3.
Correct.
Okay. Then that's the number I was hoping to
That's the chart I'll use going forward too, to make that a little.
Yeah, it's going to help.
Sure.
It helps apples to apples when it comes to the race breakdown with how we're addressing or how people are being addressed.
And if I could just add to that, right, on the flip side, right, 97% of our Latino students had no suspension, right?
Sure.
99% of our white students and 92% of our black students. So a great absolute majority of our students are doing the right things day in and day out.
So this brings up a good question, because, the CDC does not allow you to report data with cells under 20 because it could be identified. It's too small and details. And so as a board, there were 43 students who, unfortunately received a suspension. Do we need to see the statistics? Do we need to report out, or out of those 43, did we need to break it out this way, or would it have been better to present it as Ryan was saying, to look at the overall population, like Brian and Dr. Freitas were saying, there was only 3% among the Latino population, or, smaller percents among the overall population by race that received a suspension. Because when you look at it this way, it's misleading, right? Because we're only focusing on the 43. And it looks like,
I think Mr. Mannon agreed to adjust how he reports it.
Yeah.
right, so for us as a board, so I'm saying, as a board, we would not expect then to see the wheel broken out by the small population of students, because let's say there was only 4 students that received a suspension, and now all of a sudden you've got 50%, in one race. That's not really an adequate picture, right?
So he's going to change that going forward.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
sorry. I find it useful to be broken down the way you broke it down originally. Only because, yes, while it might be misleading, it could be if you don't understand the full picture. For me, I'm also looking at the greater number of suspensions took place due to inappropriate or non-compliant behavior and fighting and disruptive learning, right? All of which could be then further broken down, and you could ask, well, was it subjective behavior? Is this where the bias comes in? And I'm not saying that it did.
But
However, it could. I don't know, and I'm not trying to take us there, because I think that this pandemic has caused so much, right? But if we are, as a goal, we have one of the goals is that we're going to commit to DEI work, this is the perfect area for us to really nail down that DEI work, to really start looking at the unconscious bias, right? Because that's what caught my attention first. The knife, well, you either have it or you don't, right? Like, that's black or white. The alcohol, the drug, but fighting, disruptive, and then inappropriate, that could be subjective, maybe. I don't know, right? Because then it depends on the kind of day the teacher's having, it depends on the kind of day the student's having.
Fighting, I would say, probably could go a little more to your alcohol, and because fighting, we're pretty good about, unless there's actually hands thrown, doing some other interventions or consequences instead of suspension.
Well, no, right, so I would appreciate it if you continue doing this, because I think it does give us some really good, because now I want to know.
I think we're looking at the data differently. You can get information from the way it's presented in both, and the reason I want to see it is I want to see a per capita breakdown, which really goes apples to apples with regard to the likelihood of a consequence being doled out.
Yeah.
So my question, and if you don't mind, can you give the numbers again? It was 8% for black students, 3% for Hispanic students. What was the...
Two or more, or biracial, 0.05%, and then white was 1.3%.
1.3%. So that means that it's, I don't mean to open a can of worms, but it's fair to say it, and we can set goals properly. You're 6 times more likely as a black student to be suspended than you are as a white student. And the contributing factors to that are wide, and not right now, I don't think we can say we know it, but that's what I want to know. And so why is it that we're at a rate of 6 times higher? And how are we getting to that point? It doesn't mean that there aren't individual students that consequences are happening to. That's what it is. It's individual humans. But if it's happening where we're at a 6 times higher rate for one race over another, can we get to the root problem? Can we look at it from a standpoint of what's happening? So seeing 50% of them are Hispanic students, you're still only 2.5 times more likely as a Hispanic student than a white student in comparison to the 6 times more likely as a black student.
That
than
we
a
need
white
to make,
student.
and I think one thing we need to make sure is if there was one larger incident.
Right. I mean, we know of.
So, right, we can't
Right.
speak it. We gotta be careful what we're speaking about publicly,
sure.
but if there was one larger incident that could have.
That would
Right.
skew the numbers for sure. And so, and again, that's why Laura brings up a good point. These numbers aren't large enough to take a sample size and say this is, a real problem. Any one incident is going to cause a skew because of the smaller sample size. So I fully understand that, but I would like to see, is there a trend over a longer period of time where this is sustained, and what is the cause? Is it environmental? Is it I don't know any of what's going on. Is it how we're addressing students in the hallway? We talked, it was brought up that there were 12 incidents of disrespectful behavior to teachers, and I'm a teacher. I get it. It's hard right now when we're all living our own existence. That who knows whether, what's the trigger to anybody
maybe
running
one
into
of
that
the
situation. So
one of the follow-ups then would be, of the 43 students who were suspended, I think just to one of Ms. Gaska's questions earlier, can we confirm they're all in one of the interventions under the MTSS program? I think we want not a high likelihood, we want a positive confirmation that all 43 are being addressed through our intervention.
There's a possibility that all 43 wouldn't. If a student had a bad day and got into a fight in the hallway with somebody over something and they could be a straight A student with great attendance.
Yeah.
But they were challenged in the hallway and it ended up.
Well, then I guess reviewed by that group, is what I should say.
Absolutely.
That's something, and we meet weekly just outside of the small teams meeting, the deans and myself, and we dig into all that. And I think in talking about enhancing programs, we just got Hero to do something that they don't typically do, where we were able to create students that represent our doors for our bathrooms and just making sure we have timestamps to cut down on any vandalism or loitering, because sometimes we have fights in bathrooms. So we think outside the box, we dig into stuff like that. Also looking at IEP, the proportion of students with IEPs in regards to fights, which is significant as well, and suspensions. And so it's a lot of that information, and then drilling down into what can we do to get creative on the outside to be proactive before any of this stuff then presents itself, right? So
Before we move on really quickly, about the same chart we're all talking about, do you know the percentage of the overall population of RB? What is the Latinx? What is white? What is black? Because that's the perspective at least I'm looking for, because these numbers don't mean really anything to me until I see. Do you know off the top of your head the percentage of Latinx students or white students or?
And you just said the Hispanic, and I'll try to use those interchangeably, and I recognize that's not. 641 out of 1,640. So.
I'm not good at math. I'm sorry.
It's about 35% for the report card,
38.
Yeah, we're 52% white, we're 37.5% Hispanic, Latinx. We are just about 4.5%, 5% black, and then 5-6%, other Asian American, Pacific Islander,
other.
Multiple races.
Good thing you have 132 days to work on this.
No pressure.
Before you leave the school.
Unfortunately, I'm not in math this year. I did my math. I did 2 maths last year, and I'm no longer in math, so I guess I'm a lost cause.
You want to touch on some of the initiatives you're implementing, Mr. Manning?
Yeah, so in regards to the kind of what we're doing in the dean's office, we talked about the QR codes, the timestamps I just mentioned from Hero, handbook quick links. We discussed that. This is new this year, student safety form. So we're trying to streamline the process and the communication and just the reporting aspect of what we do with the student services office. So we do have a form now that it's kind of like a menu of what we need done in regards to student situations, whether it's like a student services check-in or a safety assessment, not a threat assessment anymore, but more or less a safety assessment and things like that. Anytime we do get a weapon, a fight, all those students do go through a safety assessment with our psychologist, social worker, deans, parent, myself, and we're asked. We go through the Virginia it's the threat assessment model in regards to. Are they good? Or do we get to the root cause of what's going on? We attend weekly restorative justice seminars and weekly equity webinars through Forensic, our legal counsel as well, which has been phenomenal resources for us for this year. And then we also extended our security hours 6:30 to 10 p.m., which has been a great asset as well, just having more people, more bodies, more eyes in the building. And then just recently too, I was a crisis prevention intervention trainer, and so going through that process and getting our security team trained up in regards to de-escalation techniques has been beneficial as well. And then lastly, just a brief overview of where we're at with activities. We have a lot of stuff going on, and as we mentioned the last time I was here a couple months ago, it's an ongoing enrollment. So if students are interested, go to our website, look at the activity page, and get involved. Send an email to the staff member, and there's ongoing membership throughout the year. So a myriad of things that we put down there. I'll just do a couple. RBTV right now is going to do a program spotlight. We're going to get to all of our programs, but we're going to start off with RBGSA, Girl Up, Association of Students of Tolerance, Best Buddies, Minority Empowerment. So they're going to do featured 5-minute clips on the story of this program. What do they do? How do they service the school and the community? So we'll see some of that. And it's actually embedded within Mr. Prokes' class. So the students are taking this on as a class to showcase what other kids are doing, which I think is phenomenal. So that's been great. We started some new clubs, biking clubs, getting up and running once it gets a little bit warmer out. Girls Who Lift, you're going to see some things with that here in the future. Bunch of girls that came up say, hey, we want to lift downstairs and go in the weight room and get healthy. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And we have a couple great sponsors that want to get involved in that, so you'll see some of that information here shortly. Strut is kind of like a social work group in regards to students that have inflicted trauma. And esports is something that I've been taking on the last couple of years. That's a state level thing now. And those competitions are going to get going here in late spring.
Yes.
And then,
there's lots of scholarships for esports.
Yes, we had a great fall play. Came into the Shrew Shenanigans show. Rock band's been doing some things in our cafeteria. Chess and Eco Club are up and running. Mass placed second in our conference. Robotics had a really good showing at one of the toughest robotics invitationals last weekend. In person, and there's so much more. Animes had 50 plus kids come out every week to join the anime club. Mindfulness is something that we're pushing. Oh, and just a plug for them, February 9th from 6 to 7 on Zoom, they're going to host kind of like a streaming event open to the community. So I really want to plug that and get, we just had our activity fair for freshmen, and Mr. Franco started this program. We had more parents and kids interested in that activity than I've ever seen before. So it's needed, so it's a free program, so I would highly recommend parents check that out.
Dave, one thing that's come up with the board and even our student board members, the more we could recognize our clubs, we tend to recognize our athletic teams at the end of the fall, winter, and spring seasons. But all the great things that are going on with our clubs, if our robotics team's in a state competition, math, please make sure that the sponsors are submitting stuff so Dr. Freitas could recognize them to the board.
Will do.
Yeah, and Mr. Mann, today, unfortunately, the dates crossed. Today was a dinner, kind of in honor of Miss Morley, who had been here, and she was a sponsor of the FCCLA. I know my daughter benefited greatly from her, received a a scholarship to Kendall through there. It was another opportunity for students. The FCCLI, they go, they compete, they do very well. And they're having their first big banquet tonight too, to bring in more opportunities for students at RB.
Great job, Dave. Did everybody get their questions answered?
Mr. Mann, and I just want to say, I've been on the board 5 years, and I appreciate the fact that every time that you give these reports, you always say, we try to think outside the box. We want to come up with new ideas to reach kids. Just that attitude in and of itself is so refreshing. I know that your job, especially right now, is not easy. So thank you for always being so optimistic and really putting kids first.
I want to thank you and your team too for contact tracing. I think
Yeah, you're getting your medical degree right at the end of the school year.
The deans might have it by the end of the year, yeah.
Nice job, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Lennon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Freitas, you got to finish your report.
All right. Good evening, honorable board members of District 208. First of all, Happy New Year to everybody. I would like to begin by giving a special thank you to all of our administrative assistants, security, cafeteria workers, maintenance, teachers, staff, and administrators for making in-person learning possible during this pandemic, right? It's highly stressful, a lot of anxiety, but our team has made it happen. We would not be able to open our doors to our Bulldog without everyone's contribution and attitude of perseverance. So I'm really proud of all the staff I work with. Teaching and learning. We have 406 freshmen. Out of the 406, 400 freshmen are on track, 6 are not. That gives us a percentage of 98.5% for the first semester. A question was submitted to me, what are we doing with those 6 students to get them back on track? Well, according to the state metric, once you're off track, you cannot get back on track. However, RB, we get them back on track, either through summer schooling, either being pulled out and getting interventions, and of course we send them right to the team, small teams. They get identified in our MTSS kind of process, and then they get the supports they needed. So even though students may be off track per state definition, we get them back on track. They're on a list, they're being monitored, the counselors know who the students are. There's been communication with parents, and the students, are getting all the supports they need to be back on track as RB season. But that's the difficult part. Once you're off track, if you failed more than half a credit in a core course or haven't earned the 5 credits, you're kind of off track, because freshman on track captures from August to May. So let's say a kid, goes to summer school, right, and earns that credit they missed. You're on track for RB, for us, but technically, according to the state, you're off track. But they are getting the supports that they need. For school culture and operation, the 5 Essential Survey is upon us. This evening, I sent communication to all the parents, to students and teachers. And in a nutshell, the 5 Essential Surveys allows community members, teachers, and students to give feedback on the climate and culture of RB and how we can improve. For the students, we'll be designated a day soon to do it in-house. For the parents and teachers, I send the information so they can complete it during their own time. We continue to practice the 3 W's at RB, wearing our mask and wearing it right. Daily, I've made announcements, to cover your nose, mouth, and to really, close the guard right here. I got to remind the students all the time, but they respond well. We watch our distance, practice social distancing, and we're washing our hands. As mentioned earlier, our average daily attendance to date is approximately 93.5%, but I do want to clarify to the Board of Education that an excused absence hurts your attendance. So even though we verify that it's excused, the student's sick, cannot make it, excused absences, right? It sounds like forgiven. It's excused, okay. Well, that actually counts against you. You have to be present in order to count. We just concluded our second booster clinic. It was packed and busy. This past Monday, we had our music-sponsored virtual meeting. Thank you for the music department, everyone involved. Our next race and equity meeting will be on next Thursday, February 3rd, from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. here at RB. For activities and athletics, I'd like to recognize just some past senior nights last week. We had a girls' gymnastics and girls' basketball and the RDE Winter Dance Show, which was fantastic. Congratulations to all the performers. and athletes. And we have upcoming senior nights this week. The swimming team on the Thursday the 27th starts at 4:30. The wrestling team at 5:15, same day. And then our boys basketball team is Friday at 7 p.m. So we do have a lot of recognition for seniors coming up. And fans are welcome at our school. We just ask that you wear your mask and you wear it right. And that concludes my principal's report.
Thank you, Dr. Freitas.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison.
So I just have a couple things tonight. I would say that the booster clinics have been really helpful because after the guidance for people under 18, like that 16 to 18 range, that's older than the 12 to 15 for boosters. It's still difficult as somebody under 18 to get an appointment to get a booster shot if you haven't gotten it, because the CVS and Walgreens websites still haven't updated to accept your birth date under 18. So you'll go in there and it'll say no. So these RB clinics have been super helpful, and I know personally a lot of people who got COVID over break, they're finally getting they've timed out whatever it might be, I think it's 2 weeks or something, from their negative test to be able to get the booster, and these are super helpful because they're right after school and you could just come right in. I would say teachers are doing an amazing job recently with all the people maybe contact tracing who were stuck elsewhere after winter break. They've been great and flexible. And tied into that, the executive functioning schedules and agendas, I would say that with the new fresh start of the semester, teachers have really been taking that to heart and publishing materials and thinking outside of the box ways to keep students organized both in the classroom and out of the classroom, whatever the situation may be. The Satchel screener this time around was a lot more visible. I know that the first window I actually missed because I didn't know when I was supposed to do it. It was sent to my email and I was told we would do it in class, and then it never happened in class, so I actually missed that. But this time with all the announcements and everything, it was easy to hear. Next Thursday, if you're not at the Race and Equity meeting, we do have a band and orchestra concert at 7 p.m., so that's Thursday the 3rd. And then, like Mr. Mannon mentioned, so I'm involved with the Mindfulness Club pretty closely, and the thing he mentioned on February 9th at 6 p.m. from 6 to 7, that is one of the most qualified mindfulness people in the Chicagoland area. She's an amazing, I don't know exactly what her degree is in, but it's an acronym that's related, I think, mindfulness-related stress management, and she's an incredibly qualified person who's going to really share amazing things with us, and it's free, and I would encourage everybody who can sign up to come and join us.
Dr. Skinkis, could you add that to our Friday update, the information, please? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, and then the last thing I have is that I would say with COVID, I personally feel a lot more comfortable being in the building than I did 3 weeks ago. There were for me, the first couple weeks back, being at lunch in the lunchroom was very nerve-wracking, but the steps that RB took to open up the alumni lounge for eating and the distancing with different seats really made a difference to me. So I now eat in the alumni lounge, which makes me feel a lot more comfortable, and I sit with a couple other people who were not necessarily comfortable in the alumni lounge. And I would also say that teachers are a lot more aware of if people are wearing their mask properly and setting those reminders, and maybe starting to introduce maybe harsher measures, because somebody could be reminded in our building 20 times in one day that they're not wearing their mask properly, but there's nothing that happens on that. And I think teachers are doing a great job, because I know personally for me, if there's somebody behind me who's wearing their mask on their chin, that's not a feeling I like. So that's all I had.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Those are some helpful and insightful comments. Moving on to the consent agenda, if we are in accord.
Okay, consent agenda. The Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois, takes the following action on the listed consent agenda items. Approves minutes from the meeting held on December 14th, 2021, open and closed. Adopts policy 4:165, awareness and prevention of child sexual abuse and grooming behaviors, and policy 7:315, restrictions on publications, high schools, as presented in the January 25th, 2022 board agenda packet. And this is an all in favor.
Second.
Need a second. Any additional comments on that? I didn't mean to breeze past any items that we discussed, obviously, previously. Any additional comments? Okay, thank you. Is it all in favor?
Thank you for your wordsmithing.
Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on to old and business. Anything under life safety items?
No additional updates at this time.
I do want to give a quick update on district goals. From our discussion 2 weeks ago, there was an article in the Landmark that ran about the district goals. We had a Google form on the website. We had some comments. I believe additional comments came in even today that I've not had a chance to look at. My suggestion is that we leave that comment period open through the end of the month, just to give it a finite close, and then adopt and discuss them in depth at our next meeting. A couple of things that have come up with the comments that have been received from the public as well as from a board member. I want to emphasize these are goals, right? These are high-level aspirational goals that we have collectively discussed in order to guide the district, and some of the more specific metrics or measurable items would then nest underneath the goals. We'd be working with the administration on that. So I want to be very clear on that, because some of the early comments that came in drew the distinction between what are currently posted as goals, and these truly capture goals for the district in all of those important areas that the school board and the district itself represents. Did you want to add something?
No, I echo that, right? These are high level. We set the what, and then we expect others to help us with the how. Correct?
Yes, exactly. So I think we're going to have some longer discussions about that how. The one issue that, if I can, Ms. Ruska, I would bring up that her and I had a discussion about, from when we had the retreat and leading into the retreat, all of our pre-work, if you will, the board members' comments did focus heavily on academics. Obviously RB is known as a strong academic school, and one of the items that Laura pointed out, I think appropriately so, was that the word academic, or that specific emphasis, is not necessarily reflected in the goals as drafted. So I think that's an important correction to make in wordsmithing, but also to emphasize it. I would suggest as part of that first goal to although the curriculum obviously has a tie into academics, but to specifically call out academics somehow as that gets drafted in its final form, I think would be appropriate. So am I capturing?
Yeah, as Deanna and I discussed, either because the writing is very nice, and I read through it so well and it read smooth, and then I told her, as I thought about it, maybe even leaving the first goal as it is, because it talks about the social and emotional, which is so important, and maybe adding one for academic, because when we think about what we do academically, academics also helps our diversity, equity, and equality goal by equally equipping every student that comes to this building so they can achieve what they want to do in life. And as I was going through the metrics, just kind of mulling through, whoa, what proxy would do this one? What proxy would do that one? And then when we got to that first one, I'm like, oh, we do so much academically, but where would that come? And so as you think about it, I know she tried to get us down to 3, but maybe we just need to have, either...
I think 5. I think we're at 5 right now.
We're at 5, but, I know when we did the workshop, she tried to, reduce this to 3.
2
but
or 3.
Maybe because the social emotional is so important, maybe you do want to break one out and just say, we are still focusing on academic, and we're going to keep measuring that, like the on track for the, 9th grade, or however many ways we measure the academic. Or that first one just becomes a little bigger and more specific, so that we get all the areas, academic, social, emotional. So, I collected some data over the couple weeks, and there was some aha moments, and so that kind of said to me, out of our mouth, we should be saying as board members, we are looking for ways, proxies, that academics is still a priority here.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a good point. Clearly, it was part of our dialogue. I think it was an assumption, but being a little more specific about it and deliberate on that point. So my suggestion is, as we go to finalize those in the coming meetings, work on some of the words that appropriately reflect academics. Laura, if you had a suggestion, or anyone else has suggestions, we can bring that up. We could talk about it more tonight if anyone's interested, but I'm not sure if we're coming to a point of conclusion tonight. So I kind of open it to the floor if anyone has thoughts on that piece.
So goal number 1, because there's explore how to maximize curricular days to provide new opportunities. I automatically assumed it was like to provide new academic opportunities.
Right, yeah.
So maybe all we do is add academic.
Right. I similarly think that those are synonyms, right? And I just my first thought of hearing this right now is I'm opposed to adding another goal. Somewhat to Lori's point during the thing and just the optics of it, like, oh, another goal? I 5 is a lot to focus on. So the fact that we are saying, some of us are saying that we think curricular and academic are synonyms in this case, maybe we
can draw a little finer point on it.
yes, and I don't know that, right, like, again, we're leaving this open till the end of the month. And so maybe just ruminating on this and seeing what, maybe based on this conversation, more comments will come in after people watch on RBTV. I don't know,
Let me just add one thing. When I worked with test development, with physicians, high stakes, one thing, the expert mind, if a test question was missing something, the expert mind fills in the gap. So the expert never sees the gap because you know what that answer is. The gap is invisible to you. So like you said, when you read the first one, of course it's academic because we're doing that. But with somebody, a complete stranger, so we actually, when we'd write these tests, had to have like strangers kind of take the questions to identify the gaps that we saw intuitively. That's some of the tension that I'm experiencing because we are filling in that gap tacitly because this is what we do. We spend a lot of time thinking about it. So I like Deanna, so like intentionally, somehow.
So I will certainly come prepared at our next meeting, and I would ask everyone to do the same with a specific suggestion on that one, and I will try to look at some of the public comment that we've received and react. And again, I would ask everyone to do the same, and we can have a more robust discussion at that point.
I'll drop the public comment in the Friday update as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Skinkis.
And I'm just now seeing I think it's 2 new additional comments, long, and I think you addressed that we're not at a point where we're making a SMART goal yet. And to address what I think has been said, I was on board with going with 2 or 3 goals with the idea that we're prioritizing things that we really want to look at under the assumption that other things are happening. But if we don't have a priority for what we're trying to accomplish and we're splitting on 5 and now the potential of 6, what are we doing? I don't know that saying we can accomplish 6 things, if you prioritize everything, you by definition prioritize nothing. So.
And I think, what I'm hearing is we most likely don't add an additional goal, but we try to
and
incorporate
my point is we already are at 5, and I think that's too many.
And the trick is going to be, not the trick, but the devil's in the details, right? Coming up with those measurable pieces of each of those goals. You'll see some very natural tie-ins to report card data, to things we heard about this evening.
Well,
I think there's
one of them I think was a maintenance goal, as it was anyway, so that's fine,
And just one of the things when we prioritize, if you're running a business, there are a lot of aspects of a business that you're looking at over the course of a year. And so, one of the things working with, the Illinois Association of School Boards, every month, like a clock, part of the calendar, there's a thing that you're focusing on and going over. There's a time for the budget. There's a time where we get the reports on the clubs. There's a time when we get the reports on different testing, academics. There's a time we get the reports on the state of the building. There's a time. All these things are happening parallel. It's not that we're only going to pick 2 or 3, but we have to make sure that every single one of these areas is working optimally as board members. And we have to I think it's our due diligence to discuss that in public, because people don't know that we're watching that, monitoring that. This meeting gives us a chance to have this conversation in public where people say, oh yeah, they are monitoring the roofs, they are monitoring the building and the budget and the activities and the resources and the curriculum, all the many aspects that this school has.
So, yeah, no, I think the format that was used to get to the goals, get us to that place, and I think our upcoming discussion will allow us to really drill down further and see where the board sits in terms of listing out those specific supporting pieces for each of the goals. Is there anything else on the goal front that anyone wants to contribute right now?
I just had a question. So these, I think I was reading all these comments of like, we need the smarkles. I just think maybe adding somewhere in this post on the website that like, we are going to add the measurables later or something like that would address like 4 or 5 of the comments. I think.
No, I think it's a fair, I was trying to address it tonight as well. I think it's a fair point.
Yeah, for those who might not be watching, just saying like, these are maybe the initiatives that we're taking, and then the specific bullet points are going to be under.
I lost my track. I had too many
Aramark
scribbles.
contract.
Aramark contract, thank you. I apologize. Is this
Dr. Smetana?
The current contract with Aramark, which is the district's purchase service for facilities and maintenance, it expires on June 30th of this year. The administration met earlier in December with the Facility Advisory Council to review the quarterly business review from Aramark, and then subsequently presented it to the board at the December meeting. But at that meeting, the council members, along with the administration, agreed to move forward with negotiating a contract extension with Aramark due to their huge assistance and leadership during the ongoing pandemic, as well as the life safety work, and we will be starting a new life safety cycle beginning in 2023. As presented in the December meeting, the current 10-year life safety cycle, the Aramark performed a majority of those tasks, and they saved the district $829,475, which we would then use to offset other projects that were either more expensive or other projects that needed to be done. As noted in the board packet on the attached Aramark slides, the recent partnership with Aramark has led to $355,000 in grants to the district, and then if you total up all of the savings, it's roughly around $600,000 in savings due to contract reductions based off of efficiency of staff and cleaning processes, prepayment discounts, and Aramark assuming the previous minimum wage increases that were required. Dr. Skinkis and myself met with Aramark representatives on 2 separate occasions in January to negotiate terms of a contract extension. As outlined in the Aramark document, there's an option for a 4-year extension and a 5-year extension. Highlights of the negotiated terms include tying the base rate increase of their contract amount to the prior year CPI, which is in our tax levy. Also maintaining the 2% prepayment discounts and receiving a grant of $125,000 for future sustainability projects in the district if we were to go with a 5-year option. There was a question submitted about the green highlighted CPI figures in board book. That's a document that I created to estimate what the increased cost would be over the 5 years. Since we don't know those CPIs, I was kind of estimating what they would be to project a cost. So it's not that Aramark would want to renegotiate that. What they're proposing is CPI for the previous year tax levy, but with a minimum of 2% and a maximum of 4%.
So we would anticipate in year 6, looking back at something like this. This is not, we're not indexing the contract to CPI. I guess I was not quite following what.
So we wanted to show you, like, we already know what the first 2 years of the new contract will be and the overall impact to the district. We don't know what the last 3. So what we were just trying to show the district, if it went like 3-2-2, the overall financial impact over a 5-year term for a new contract only cost the district $65,000 after you subtract $125,000 from the grant they're giving us.
But 322 could be 466.
We have a cap of 4.
It would never.
It could be 444. It could be 1, or it could be 222 at the lowest, because they wanted a.
I missed about the cap, so no, that's helpful to know. Okay, thank you.
So is there going to be a finance advisory council to see what the administration recommends between the 2 choices, or are we going to? That here?
That's here. We put in our recommendation that we would prefer the 5-year, just to leave that extra money on the table. You could see they're trying to incentivize us to a 5-year agreement. this is only the first read, so the board have time to read this, take a look at this again, and we can vote on it in February. But we think this addresses, they've been a good partner. They have a.
How long have they been our partner?
Well, the 11 years that I've been here for sure, so.
It was a few years before that, I believe.
Yeah.
So maybe
So-
14, 15?
We did some of that in-house, and like most things, we had employees on our thing, and then we outsource.
Sure.
So,
I guess my point being is it's a lot, like, the money looks pretty decent. It's a long-standing relationship. We've been very happy with the relationship. Building a new relationship with another company is a whole big undertaking, right?
right.
I mean, for a couple $1,000s, I don't know that that's worth it, right? In my opinion.
I mean, the first round, the 31,000 increase over the first round of the last contracts with them, that was an incredible price.
Yeah. They've been a very good partner. And we have a very good
And when
relationship.
we met with them, when we met with the Earmark people and the Finance Advisory Council, we asked them things about, will you have enough employees? Because obviously employees shortages is something that could affect another company we went to. So I asked them outright, what are you doing to keep employees? And they have employee retention and they have employee recruiting on a big time scale. They are a bigger company.
Sure.
So if we were worried about COVID-related stuff, supply chain and employees, I think they're the ones. I think they have that. That won't be a problem. Because that's the last thing I wanted was to go with a contract and all of a sudden, we don't have the
And we
employees to do
can't
this.
send somebody to do the business we promised, right?
Right.
One of the other things we put in there, and now I realize it's not finance, it's facility, because you're also on facility with Mr. Ruska. So that's who talked about it.
It
But-
begins with an F.
Yeah, so I was like, wait, finance, I'm looking at Ms. Gask, like, can I bring you in on this? And I'm like, one of the other things we negotiated, we front-loaded, with the new state mandate of raising the minimum wage $1 each year till it gets to 15, we front-loaded this so that we would start the 5-year extension with $15 up front to try to increase employee retention and recruiting new employees as vacancies become opening. So as vacancies become available. And we're sharing that cost with them because they see the importance of that as well.
Yeah.
So I do think the 5-year agreement is a good agreement for the school district.
And we also asked them about supplies. Are you going to have all the supplies you need? And it seemed like supplies, people, and the other thing I mentioned is it looked good. As opposed to going outside for whatever you do, an RPF or RFP.
Yeah, I would also add two things as an example to supplies. When we came back in January, the health office was concerned because we got small gloves and we got large gloves from the county, but we didn't have enough large gloves and the small gloves didn't fit. And they're like, we can't find these gloves anywhere, and when we find them, they're super expensive. I walked over to Airmark and we had them, within 48 hours, we had whatever gloves we needed. Like, their ability to access supplies because they're a larger company is very different and very helpful. And I would also add that they intimately know our building. Our facilities manager, Berm, knew the pool motor was going, and we were prepared and we had the part on hand, and it was in the process of getting prepped. So the second we had an opportunity to shut the pool down for 24 hours, we could do it. And they know our HVAC systems. They caught the fact that 2 control boards were starting to go. They're on top of all of our structures that we have in place and all of our equipment because they have been intimately working with these to make sure that they're working properly over the past several years.
It sounds like you're answering my question, but have there been, and without asking for any specifics, have there been any performance issues with the company?
Not in my tenure here that I can think of.
Okay.
So it would be when you say performing, do we have a custodian miss a garbage can, or do we have somebody?
I am not talking
Yeah, those kind
anymore.
of things, but as far as large scale, no.
Yes.
We're good.
They actually, in the report we gave you a couple months ago, they actually tell you how fast they turn around complaints and that type of thing.
Right. And I do remember reading that, and I'm looking more on the longs. I haven't heard anything bad, and I will say I walk into the bathrooms around here, and I am a little bit disturbed by how clean they are. So
They were on board when we completed the referendum expansion. They've been on board for the football field, athletic field, and parking and all that expansion and the underground work. So they've been here. When he says they know our building,
right.
they've been through the growth that this building has had in the last 12, 15 years.
You know, what also too is when they're involved in such projects like that, now you're starting to get to a point, you know, because of the time I've been here, Dr. Smetana's been here with them and the projects, we're starting to get to where like, okay, we're probably within the next 5 to 7 years starting to talk about what does a turf replacement look like? What does, right? We're starting our second life safety project here in 23, which we'll be looking at the roofs that the district completed in 2009, right? So they've been a very good partner. I think Kristen and I always try to make sure the fiscal side is very responsible and advantageous to the district, and I think we're getting a good agreement here.
This is a first read.
First read, yes, sir.
Okay, we move on then, thank you.
I think that's,
Visitor statements, we don't have any. Consideration of items for future meetings. Ms. Ruska, I know you had something?
I did, and so I wanted to bring it to the board. Dr. Skinka sent us that Governor Pritzker vetoed that current bill and kind of the changes of it. And so I was wondering, do we have, or do we want to ask our administration, are we getting an extra substitute? Are we accumulating fees because people are out? You know, they have to be out for family members due to COVID, and so now we need to bring in substitute. Because part of when reading through that veto and everything, the bill, it was saying some of the burden then would fall on school districts to try and cover, but people being out more.
well, we already have a memorandum of agreement with our union on, so they're not using personal sick time. I think the biggest thing that he negotiated with the unions is that the employees weren't losing personal sick time. We've been, over the last year, we did the MOA so that they're using sick days.
But
Have
if
we
they're-
had additional sub-costs? Yes.
Yeah, if they're out. And so I was just wondering, because I remember a couple years ago, I think when Mr. Welsh was on the board, we were kind of looking at some of the sub-costs, you know, it ebbs and flows.
Right.
And I
But
don't
we're
know.
going to see an extreme sub-cost this year because of COVID, right?
Right.
Because every time
That's what I
someone
mean,
has- right.
COVID related, yeah.
So COVID related, that's the only, I mean,
Yes.
I would say.
Yes.
And our teachers have done a really good job of stepping in and covering classes, but that is, you know, $17 more than a traditional sub. But at some point, you know, if we get a notice, if someone comes in on a morning and tests positive, they go home immediately. We don't have time to secure stuff, so we'll be using internal subs, so that cost is a little more pricey. So you're gonna see a larger impact on subs, and that's one of the sacrifices that districts gotta make in order to have in-person learning.
Right, and then given some of the changes that are being proposed in that bill, that fee, that price tag could even increase, correct?
I don't think that will impact us too much,
Okay.
because we're already, I mean, you've already been doing it for the first year and a half of the pandemic to cover classes.
And we've had the MOU in place now since last summer,
Yeah, the only
correct?
thing that this
Yeah.
would impact, like, is that it was giving employees back their benefit days. We weren't taking their benefit
Right.
days. So overall, this really shouldn't have that large of an impact on us.
And we're reducing the number of days that you're out. It's already down to
Correct.
5. It's becoming less of an impact.
Burdensome, yeah.
I mean, and also I think practically speaking, the new legislation won't be approved until, let's say, mid-February, and I think there's what's the retroactivity period going to be in the bill, I think we have to wait and see what the
Right.
final legislation looks like.
But even if it went, like, the bigger thing, when you see the update I sent out, it was from a state organization, the
Yeah.
larger impact that I think people were concerned about is returning benefit days for over 2 years, which was originally discussed. Even last year, we created an MOU, so we were using sick bank. So we weren't taking employee benefit days. So we were already somewhat of a step ahead of kind of what this legislation helped amend between the union, you know, the teachers' unions and districts.
Yeah, that part, I wasn't as worried. I was just wondering, like, the increase in substitute days, but I forgot about the reduction of 5 days, because that could be a wild card, you know, all of a sudden the substitute benefit is, like
We're
you say, if your
gonna
your
exceed
child
our,
is sick, you have to be
we're
home.
gonna
you know?
exceed our sub-budget. I could prepare the board for that.
Okay.
If not, we may don't.
I don't know if we will, I don't wanna jinx it, but, in the board packet, we're at, 42% of that budget after
Okay,
the first
that's
semester.
great.
So with the
Yeah,
quarantine days
50%
going-
of the year done with
Okay.
42% of the money spent?
So
We
with the
increased
days
that
going
this year,
down to
didn't we already?
5, we did, not this past year, I believe.
Okay.
So we don't expect a huge like blowout or spike or anything like that?
No, if it comes in over budget, I would think that would be a minor over budget.
Yeah.
Especially considering where you're
So are we
trending right now.
discussing this item for future?
I guess we did, you know, I guess, you know, there was
Is that what you
resolved,
wanted to
Lay the
yeah.
groundwork for the
Yeah, I just
discussion
thought
of the
it
future
could be a
meeting.
surprise and maybe we should be
think we're
warned,
good.
you know?
I think we've
I guess we got our answer, it's not gonna be a big
And I think we need to
surprise,
just, and I think, Dr. Skinkus probably will continue to keep us abreast of the legislation as it does get finalized in Springfield. That being said, consideration of items for future meetings, anybody else? No additional comments? Matters for closed session, personnel, student discipline, purchase, sale, lease of real property, probable imminent or pending litigation, collective negotiations, school safety.
Second.
No, not yet.
That was me listing the
I'm
items.
listening to.
Wait, the Board of Education, you're kidding, you wanna go home? The Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois, enters closed session for the purpose of considering appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of a public body, student discipline, purchase, sale, lease, or lease of real property, probable imminent or pending litigation, collective negotiations, and school safety.
Second.
There you go.
Can we have a roll call?
listening to
Ms.
Bill.
Nardi?
Ms. Fiasco?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Ms. Towner?
Yes.
Mr. Van Horst?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Ms. Saylor?
Yes.
We'll just
Okay.
stay up here.